Like that was kind of like the criticism, broadly speaking. And since you are talking about this, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically.
I think that
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and my experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. Last week, during an interview with GQ, Sweeney was asked about the controversial reaction to her viral American Eagle ad, and her response to that question was a festival of body language, so expressive that it's already become a popular meme. In this video, we're going to take a look at that reaction and the very subtle but powerful behaviors of both Sydney and the interviewer. What do their body language, facial expressions, and word choice actually reveal? Let's dive right in.
we would sometimes just cry because of how powerful this story is. And so being able to share that experience with the world and to be able to show Christy's story to the world is so impactful. We really shaped every single fight to match Christy's fights. And so all the different combos that you see me doing are the actual combos from the fights. And I had the best girls to box with because they were down to actually fight.
Okay, so on the channel, we often talk about baseline and how important it is for behavioral analysis, because baseline is the behaviors that someone is displaying during a conversation when there's no stressor present. And when we see a lot of deviations from that baseline, we know that something might be going on here and it's worth looking into. Right off the bat, as she's talking about her new movie, Christy, we're seeing a very reliable baseline from Sweeney. So one of the things you'll notice is that she uses a lot of what the research calls illustrators. This is when we use hands or our head or our eyebrows to illustrate what we're saying. This is something that's very common for performers, whether it's on camera or live entertainers. It's very common to see these big illustrators because it's a storytelling tool that helps someone really paint a more vivid picture for the audience to connect with. Speaking of connecting with emotion, notice that right in the beginning, as she's talking about the movie, Christy, she says we would sometimes cry at how powerful the story is. And in that moment, as she's recalling that, we see very quickly, very fleeting, in her forehead and in the eyebrows, the micro expression of sadness. So the universal emotions are emotions that the research has shown look the same everywhere in the world. And one of them is sadness, which means that everywhere you go in the world, sadness will look more or less the same. And one of the telltale signs is the eyebrows coming closer together and rising here at the inner corners. So it's not the whole eyebrow that goes up, it's just those inner corners like this. And the reason I'm using my fingers is because this is very difficult to fake. Very few people can fake it. If you're trying it at home, which often happens every time I make that statement, your best odds aren't to try to do it muscularly, but try to think of something sad and notice what's happening and lean into it. That's the best way to do it. But not everyone can fake it. And here, as Sweeney is talking about how sad they got on set filming some of these scenes, we notice for a moment those inner corners come in and raise just a little bit. It's not a big, obvious, sad facial expression. It's just a slight glimmer of the eyebrows going in that right direction. And the other thing you'll notice is that when we're sad, the glabella is a muscle up here that with sadness dips like this, makes a little U shape. And in that moment, with her eyebrows, we see that glabella flexing just a little bit as well. So this is such a great demonstration of something I've said on the channel before. Actors don't really study body language at great depth. In other words, they don't tell themselves when they're about to do a sad scene, okay, get sad here, so make sure that your face droops and make sure your eyebrows come together and up and make sure your mouth is a little bit open. They don't do those things. They channel the emotion and are effectively able to communicate it on their face in a way that we all connect with. And we're seeing an example of that in this moment. As she thinks about how sad that role made her at times, we're instantly seeing signs of that emotion coming through her face to communicate it. We see the same amount of effectiveness when she's talking about how the combos that she did in the movie were combos from Christy's actual fights, because this is a biopic, and we see in the eyes that she's communicating how shocking or surprising it is that they were able to recreate those moments. So again, as she thinks about how impressive that is, we just see it on her face. Another thing that we're getting a baseline for here, and I think this is one of the most important things to baseline, is when she's recalling or thinking of moments on the set or things they said or how they worked, her eyes go down here as she recalls. I know that there are a lot of myths out there about, oh, when we're telling the truth, the eyes go this way, and when we're lying, the eyes go this way, like it's global, like this applies to everyone. And I can promise you that's not true. If it was true, interrogations and trials would last seconds, because we'd see the eyes go in whatever direction is supposed to be a lie, and it will be over. Look, I'm a mentalist, and for 2 decades, I've gone on stages and stared at the faces of people who were either lying or telling the truth for entertainment. And I can promise you, there is not a universal pattern. Some people go up, some people go this way, some people search around quite a bit, and some people don't even have a baseline at all. They'll go up here for one memory and then down there for another memory, and it looks entirely different. Every now and then, I do see a reliable baseline. In fact, on a recent podcast, I pointed out to the host that when he thinks of real memories, he often goes right down here to his right. And then later, while I was performing for him, I was able to tell that he was actually thinking of a real memory because he went to that reliable spot. But it's not always that crystal clear at all. All this to say that with Sydney Sweeney, it's often these little pops to the left. And sometimes it's just to the left down here. Sometimes it starts in the middle and then moves down. Sometimes it's high up and it moves down. But as she's talking, we often see her go to the left like this as she searches her memory to try to describe what happened on set.
And I think that for me, I find myself in a lot of battles, both in front and not in front of the world. So I definitely can relate.
Okay, I love that scene because she's softly approaching the subject of the American Eagle ad, which they're going to go into more detail later. But right here, she's kind of hinting at it very early in the interview. And we see a lot of stuff with the nonverbal communication, starting with this eyebrow flash and the eyes closing. So let's start with the eyebrow flash. There is a ton of research on the importance of eyebrows in communication, and socially, universally, it usually falls into one of 3 categories when we see those eyebrows go up like that. One is emphasis. We emphasize important things with the eyebrows. The second is some kind of social connection or social approval or greeting. So you might see someone and you might greet them with the eyebrows going up. And finally, surprise. When something surprises us, the eyebrows go up. So think of the eyebrows as the exclamation point of the face. When something's important, whether it's a person, an event, or an idea, those eyebrows go up. In this moment with Sydney Sweeney, it looks a lot like the eyebrow flash of social connection or approval. And the reason I say that is because of all the other behaviors that we can observe. For example, you'll notice she turns to the reporter right after the eyebrow flash. She smiles, which is always a good sign that we're trying to connect with someone. And we see a head tilt, which happens very often with skepticism or curiosity, but also when we're either offering or requesting sympathy. You'll notice that very often when someone says a sad story, people react with, oh, this head tilt. And the research shows that the reason we do this is because, first of all, it shows a vulnerability, the neck saying, I'm not a threat. And second, the tilting of the eyes feels less like an intimidating glare. So it just softens that moment of sympathy. The other thing you'll notice with the eyebrow flash is this eye blocking or slow blink. So our eyes stay closed for a moment. And this is innate to all humans. We're born with the reflex to do this. And we do it when we're trying to focus on something or trying to focus away from something. So keep a thought in or out. And every now and then we do it when we don't want to face the reaction of someone. So a sensitive topic is coming up and we're getting this eye block because we may not want to see the reaction of the person. We fear that it might be negative. And all this makes perfect sense. What all these behaviors likely indicate is that she's testing the waters with the subject to see if this is going to be a friendly conversation when it comes up again, or if it's going to be confrontational. So she brings it up as a joke with this smile, looking at the reporter, eyebrow flash, head tilt, smile in a way to soften the topic and suggest, let's not get too serious about this. Okay, now we're going to move on and look at some of the ways that these questions were asked, which is really important, as well as the answers that she gave concerning the American Eagle ad campaign and a massive inconsistency in one of her responses. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and take a quick second to like this video because it really does help with the growth of the channel.
I always speak out about something that is important to me. And for me to speak out, I use art. And I think that through my characters in my movies, it's a way for me to be able to do my part that I can and spread awareness in different ways through my characters.
Okay, so I'm not even going to do analysis on that clip, but it's a really important pin to put because she's saying while talking about her current movie, Christie, and some of the themes it explores, that she will always speak up about something if it's important to her. So those are her words. If something is important to her, she will always speak up. Let's just put a pin in that.
You're on Euphoria, which is a show that covers a lot of topics without taking a moral stance on any of them. It does not look like a very political career, but you have become very swept up in politics. And so I wondered if that has surprised you as you put your ideas and yourself into art, not commentary.
I've always believed that I'm not here to tell people what to think. I'm just here to kind of open their eyes to different ideas. And so I think that's why I gravitate towards characters and stories that are complicated and are maybe morally questionable, and characters that are on the page hard to like, but then you find the humanity underneath them.
Okay, so there's a lot going on over here with not just the behaviors, but also the psychology of interviewing. Now, for those of you who are unaware as to what the American Eagle ad controversy was, I don't want to do a whole thing on it, but really quickly, for those of you who don't know, she did an American Eagle ad for jeans where the slogan was, Sydney Sweeney has great jeans. So the slogan was obviously a play on words. They were talking about genetics, not denim. And some critics felt that it was a reference to eugenics and it was overly focused on Sydney Sweeney's appearance. Whereas others said, it's just an innocent play on words. So that was the controversy of that ad. So here, as the interviewer, Catherine, is laughing, she's saying you've been swept up into politics, suggesting that it wasn't really her own doing. And this is something she's going to do a lot throughout the interview. When she asks a charged question, she softens it by kind of relating to her a little bit, or by saying, it's really not your own doing, like this. And she goes, did that surprise you, given that you normally put your thoughts into art, not commentary? Obviously very softly referencing the American Eagle ad. But what does Sydney Sweeney do? She completely ignores the American Eagle ad and talks about her philosophy of putting her thoughts into her movies and the things that are important to her, the messages, into her work, into her movies. You'll also notice there's a slight deviation here with her eyes from the way she typically answers. So usually she asks a question, she thinks back, we see the eyes go over here, left or down left like this, then she comes back and answers. Here she stalls for a while on the left. I can even see it in my editing software. There's this big lull. And she's stuck here as she tries to think of her words. And then as she's answering, we see the eyes move up here and they go up here. She's really searching here and even going into the abstract, talking about the different characters, as opposed to going to specific memories and specific answers. And this is something we see elsewhere in the interview as well. When she's talking about hopes and dreams or more abstract thoughts, she may move up here, whereas typically when she's answering specific questions related to things that actually happened, we're getting these quick darts like this to the left, searches here as she recalls, and then she gives the answer. There's something really interesting that happens right at the end, because on the surface, it seems like she's avoiding the American Eagle ad campaign at this moment. But right at the end, she says that she gravitates towards characters that are morally questionable, hard to like on the page, but then you see their humanity. And that changes things. That's what she's implying there. And she puts this focus on humanity and how it's more important to her than what we see on the page. I think what she's doing there is planting a seed to put the importance on core humanity. That way, when we inevitably go to the American Eagle conversation, she's already laid the groundwork that core humanity is more important than what we see on the surface.
We're sort of talking around this American Eagle ad right now, and maybe we should just talk about it. So, were you surprised by the reaction?
I did a jean ad. I mean, the reaction definitely was a surprise, but it was, I love jeans. All I wear are jeans. I'm literally in jeans and a t-shirt like every day of my life.
Jeans are uncontroversial. Jeans are awesome.
I like your jeans.
You look great in your jeans.
Okay, a lot going on here. So Catherine acknowledges that so far they've been dancing around the subject of the ad. And this is a way to kind of soften a topic by kind of joking about how, okay, well, we implied it so far, let's just talk about it now. So we kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about the conversation. And, Sydney laughs and she laughs, like they're both acknowledging that, yeah, they danced on the subject. And she finally asks, were you surprised by the response? So remember, that's the question. Were you surprised by the response? So in interview and interrogation, when a question is asked, we often ask ourselves, did that answer my question and did it answer my entire question? So in this case, the question is, were you surprised by the response? And the immediate response is, I did a jean ad. So that's the first thing she said. which is instantly going to the defensive, right? She does go on to answer and saying that the response did surprise her. That's all we get there. But then we get a lip compression. So you'll notice we see it not just with the lips thinning out, but with the muscles of the chin as well. The lips are being compressed. And this is very consistent with withheld opinion or disagreement. So very often you'll notice in a group of people, somebody says something and one person is kind of not really contributing, but sitting there like that. They're either holding in something or disagree with the conversation. So we see that there. She's hesitating, she's thinking, she's searching for something to say here. And she ends with, I love jeans, which for me was the biggest of this whole answer, because what information is that giving us? Is she implying that she loves jeans so much that she would have done this commercial for free if American Eagle said, hey, we want you to do a jean commercial. We're not going to pay you, but we know you love jeans. And she would have said, yeah, absolutely, I'll do the commercial because I love jeans. So is she trying to imply that that was her only motive for doing the ad? Or is she telling us that that's the only message we should read into, right? I love jeans. There's nothing more to it. It was just a commercial for something that she loves. And she looks at the reporter again, establishes that connection, laughs about it, and the reporter jumps into that and goes, yeah, jeans are great. You look great in your jeans. So it just softens the whole conversation and directs away from the controversy.
The president tweeted about the jeans ad, or Truth Socialed about the jeans ad, and that just seems to me like a very crazy moment for anyone. And I wondered what that was like.
It was surreal.
It was surreal.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be totally human. I would probably feel like thankful that somebody had my back in public, and conveniently some very powerful people had my back in public. And I wondered if you felt that way.
I don't think that it's not that feeling I didn't have that feeling, but I wasn't thinking of it like that, or like of any of it. I kind of just put my phone away. I was filming every day. I'm filming Euphoria, so I'm working like 16-hour days, and I don't really bring my phone on set, so I work and then I go home and I go to sleep. So I didn't really see a lot of it.
I have a video on the channel where I talk about these techniques and show examples of them used in an interrogation room to open someone up and have them speak more truthfully. And I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. But we literally talk about things like what she did here, where you try to connect, empathize, and socialize a certain position. So she's saying here that, I would imagine that it would be crazy for anyone, for the president to go on social media and write about them. And she said, I would feel thankful if someone had my back. So she's kind of very much softening that to pave the way for Sydney Sweeney to go, I did feel thankful for that. And you could see that it causes a struggle in Sydney Sweeney because she pauses for very long. She gives an answer that's, neither here nor there, a lot of hesitation, a lot of searching. And finally, when she catches her rhythm, we see a lot of prolonged eye contact. So this is someone who up until now when she was speaking would look away as she thinks of her words and look back as she answers like this. So when she's relaxed and casual, we see that. But here, besides the hesitation, we're seeing these long stretches of her while she's talking about how she didn't have her phone on her, how she's looking at her. She's really staring at her. At the end there's a long stretch where she's talking about not bringing her phone on set, where she's just looking at Catherine while she's saying that. One of the biggest studies that was ever done on eye contact and deception disproved a common myth. Although they concluded that there isn't really a pattern, different people do different things with eye contact when they're being deceptive. In that study, there were more people, not enormously more, not all of them, but more people maintained eye contact during deception than people who broke away from eye contact. And they concluded that the reason for this was, first of all, because a lot of people know the myth that, when we're being deceptive, we look away. But second, they wanted to connect and see if their story was working. So it's definitely not reliable enough to say like every time you see someone maintaining eye contact, they're definitely being deceptive. There's no such behavior. I just think it's really interesting here that in this moment where it really feels like she's trying to convince the listener and the interviewer of something that I don't really check my phone, something that we know is rather unlikely, she's got this eye contact going on at the end, specifically when she's saying, I don't really bring my phone on set. The other thing that's interesting about that statement is the use of the word really. This is called an exclusion qualifier.
I don't really bring my phone on set, so I work and then I go home and I go to sleep.
Exclusion qualifiers allow us to answer a question honestly while leaving ourselves a bit of an escape route. So in an interrogation, for example, if someone is asked, when's the last time you were in New York? And they go, I don't really go to New York that often, which could be true globally, but they were in New York when the event in question took place. So it's honest, but misrepresents the situation. And it's similar in this case when she goes, I don't really bring my phone on set. Well, do you not really bring your phone on set? Do you sometimes bring your phone on set? And even if that was true, even if she didn't bring her phone on set, what is that supposed to mean in this context? Is she trying to say that she was unaware of the response to the ad? That she was unaware that the president went on social media and commented on this? Because she said it was surreal, so she was aware about it. She also said earlier that she was surprised by the reaction, so obviously it got to her. So what does she mean by she doesn't bring her phone on set? It doesn't really answer the question in any way. You'll also notice in the midst of that answer, along with all these other things we talked about, we see two things in quick succession. One is a face touch right here above the mouth, and the second one immediately after that is she turns away and kind of looks away. It doesn't look like she's searching for a thought like she often does, but she turns away in what we call an exit check, which is something we often see when someone is looking for an out or trying to disengage from something. We see these quick glances away like this, often towards the door or often towards someone to kind of be able to get out of this conversation or situation. But let's talk about the mouth scratch like this as well. This is something that high-level CIA interrogators are trained to look for in clusters of deception. And I can't overemphasize clusters of deception, because sometimes obviously a face scratch is just a face scratch. So if you're talking to someone, baseline is maintained, everything's okay, they scratch their face, that's probably nothing. But when we start to see a lot of these things come together, it's a good indication that stress is on the rise. And here we're seeing a lot of things. So in those circumstances, research has shown that during stress and deception, the blood flow of the face actually changes. And this sensation can cause someone to scratch their face. The other thing that's interesting is the location, because this isn't just a face touch, it's also a mouth block. The hand is coming up and subtly blocking the mouth. So we do talk about this a lot on the channel. When we're little and we say something we're not supposed to say, whether it's a swear word or someone's secret that slipped out, the hands come up like this and we block the mouth, trying to take those words back. As we age, we get better at it, but we often see in moments where someone's stressed or saying something that's not entirely true, where the hand comes up like this and blocks the mouth. The best example I've seen of this in adults was Amber Heard during her deposition when she said something she wasn't supposed to say about TMZ, and her hands literally shot up like this, both hands in front of her mouth to try to stop herself, and then she just went to the hair like this to make it seem like her hands were there to groom her hair. What a perfect example of how sometimes completely involuntarily those hands come up like this to block the mouth in times where we're saying something that may not be 100% truthful. So what's going on in this scenario? Honestly, I think that she's very stressed about this question. She's being asked about the president's support. She has to navigate this question very delicately and not say something that's either too much to one side or the other. So I think she's just at all costs trying to avoid the topic. That's why we're seeing this exit check. We're seeing signs of stress here, that face touching. We're seeing that eye contact, trying to connect with the person, trying to like really sell this narrative. I don't really check my phone. I don't know what's going on. I don't really want to talk about this whole subject at all.
You've made a really good case for keeping your thoughts and your life separate from that work. But the risk is that, there's a chance that somebody will get some idea about what you think about certain issues and feel like, I don't want to see Christy because of that. Like, do you worry about that?
No. If somebody is closed off because of something they read online to a powerful story like Christy, then I hope something else can open their eyes to being open to art and being open to learning, and I'm not gonna be affected by that.
Yeah.
The reporter here attempts to do something similar to what she was doing earlier in saying that you've made a really good case for keeping your thoughts and your life separate from that work. And we see her struggling to find the right words. She's looking off into the distance. We're seeing these little shrugs. She's going back and forth with her head like this. But then she goes to, are you scared that somebody won't go see Christy because they get certain ideas about your position as a result of your response? But in that case, and I think she knows this, which justifies the struggle she's having, she's kind of tipping her hand a little bit, because in asking, are you scared that such and such thing will happen, she's implying that she can conceive that something like that would happen. And I suppose it's possible that it's coming from a very objective place, like she's seen it happen, so she's objectively asking, do you think that it'll happen? But I feel like the struggle with the reporter is that she kind of understands that that thing might happen as a result of Sydney Sweeney not commenting on this. What Sydney Sweeney does as a response is psychologically subtle and quite clever, because what she says is, no, I'm not worried about that. And then she talks about how if people aren't going to go see her new movie, Christy, which they earlier talked about, how it's important, and there's some very important themes like DA, for example, that they touch on in the movie. So what she's saying is, if people aren't going to go see that movie because of something that they read online about me, then I would hope that they will open their eyes because of something else and be open to learning. So what she's saying there, creating a connection, it's subtle, but she's saying, if you're not going to go see this movie with a very important theme because of something you read online that I haven't confirmed, that is just a suspicion, that's just gossip, then you are not open to learning. And she's trying to put learning and the themes discussed in the Christie movie above the online chatter. And this is a good point to remind everyone that I'm not saying what's right or wrong, what she should do or shouldn't do, what people should do or shouldn't do in response. I'm just saying what is. That's what behavioral analysis does. I'm just looking at her statement and pointing out that she's creating this rivalry between having opinions about her and going to see this very important movie and learning about these important themes.
You've come here like really willing to talk about this whole discourse that doesn't have that much to do with you, and I'm grateful for that. Is there something that you want to say about the ad itself? The Sydney Sweeney has great genes. Do you have...
The ad spoke for itself.
You think the ad spoke for itself?
Yeah.
Okay. And the criticism of the content, which was basically that maybe specifically in this political climate, like white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. Like that was kind of like the criticism, broadly speaking. And since you are talking about this, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically.
I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear.
We should talk about Cassie. You got back together with Cassie. You spent some time in Cassie land.
And there it is, the clip that has gone viral with good reason. And again, Catherine is starting with a statement saying, it doesn't have much to do with you, reiterating that you're not to blame here. I get it. I'm on your side. And you'll notice as she's bringing up the ad, the American Eagle ad, we see an eye block or a slow blink. So as she's asking the question, and this goes right back to what we were talking about earlier, when we close those eyes, either we're trying to focus on something or away from something. And in this case, it's that focusing away from seeing the disappointment in Sydney Sweeney, because she's pushing a little bit here to try to get an answer out of her, and she knows that. So it's kind of that, I don't want to break this connection that we have, a little bit of a fear of reaction, eye block. Then as a response from Sydney Sweeney, we get a gesture that throughout my career as a behavioral analyst has been my Everest. So she's asked if she has anything she would like to say about the American Eagle ad, and we see a lip compression, but the lips also lower at the same time. Now, this is something she's done elsewhere in this interview, especially that compression, but this is the one where we really see that lowering. And the reason I say this has been my Everest is because for the longest time, I couldn't figure out one category to put that lowering of the mouth in. Allow me to explain. Imagine you and I go to a concert and the opening band comes out and we don't know who they are. And they start playing and I turn to you and I go like this. That would usually suggest non-verbally, not bad, they're pretty good, that's impressive. On the other hand, I might turn to you and go like this. The mouth did the exact same thing, but that could also mean, no, not that great, not that impressive. I also see this gesture a lot when someone doesn't really care or can't make up their mind. For example, hey, do you want steak or sushi tonight? And someone goes like this. I don't care. So it does happen a lot with shrugging, but the thing I would expect to see most often with shrugging is a mouth shrug. This is what the research has shown. When I'm trying to tell you I don't care, it doesn't make a difference to me, I would go like this. The mouth goes up and it's compressed. But so often I also see it go downwards in those specific scenarios. So for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what it meant. I looked up the research. There really aren't too many people who talked about them. Ekman very briefly has mentioned that we might see the lips tighten and go down in moments where we're trying to regulate emotions, like trying to hold back a smile. And I know what he's talking about. It's more like this kind of thing, when it's held and we're trying to hold down a smile, but that's not exactly what this is. And at the end of the day, after having observed it in a lot of scenarios and tried to find the commonality between those scenarios, I think that it is very close in meaning to a mouth shrug. It represents some kind of disengagement, but I think the most accurate description of what it represents is, I don't have anything to say. So go back to the examples that I gave and think about it in context, right? The opening band comes up, they're pretty good, and I go, yeah, well, I don't have anything bad to say. But similarly, it can mean I don't have anything good to say. So you might go like this, I don't have anything good to say. Or do you want steak or sushi? And I go, I don't have anything to say, whatever you want. So what I've determined is look at the rest of the face. Because if the eyebrows are going up and it's surprise and you're getting that kind of lips lowering or like that, it's, I don't have anything bad to say. This is actually surprisingly good. Similarly, if there's a more relaxed or neutral look on the face, I don't really have anything good to say. I have nothing to add here. So it falls into the family of mouth shrugs, lip compressions, which is anytime there's tightness in the mouth, it's some kind of withheld thing. Anyways, thanks for coming to my TED Talk about lowered and compressed lips. What I find ironic is most people knew exactly in that moment that with that compression, that kind of head shaking, she is non-verbally saying, no, I have nothing to say. I have a withheld opinion. I think that's pretty obvious. It's just I saw that lip thing that's bugged me my whole career, so I want to talk to you guys about it. Then after this lip gesture, she says that the ad spoke for itself, quite literally saying that she doesn't have anything to say about this. So yeah, great work, Detective Spidey. And then there's a mood change because the reporter didn't get a fuller response, so she goes a little bit more into the topic and says, you know, some of the criticism out there, not me, but out there, has been that white people shouldn't comment on genetic superiority. And I just wanted to give you a chance to comment on that. So again, it's like, you know, this is what they're saying, but what do you think of that? So she's trying to be still kind of delicate about it, but it is getting a little bit more confrontational at this point. And by the way, you'll notice that since this topic came up, so from the last question even, Sydney Sweeney's breathing has moved a lot higher. And this is a great indication of stress. Usually when we're relaxed in a pleasant conversation, the breathing is deeper. And in this case, she's wearing a jacket with a zipper and buttons that make it very obvious when that breathing moves up because we see more movement in that jacket. And it happened here and it happened in the last question as well around this topic. And that's when we see the big viral moment from Sydney Sweeney because she gives Catherine this stare. And a lot of people are using that as a meme, this kind of way she's just staring at her. And there are some details that not everyone is talking about. Like, first of all, not just what's there, but what isn't there. So far, whenever she was being asked things, she was nodding along in agreement. In this case, there's no agreement. She's just looking at her. And most importantly, we have this little bit of a head tilt. Now remember, head tilting often happens in either sympathy or with listening intently, curiosity, or skepticism. And in the real world, we often see it in moments of challenge. It's kind of a nonverbal way of saying, you really have my attention. We often see this with parents when they're looking at their kids, the kid's doing something he's not supposed to do, and you kind of see the parent looking at the kid like this as nonverbal, I'm watching, my attention's on you. So here we have this complete lack of amusement, complete lack of agreement with this stare and a bit of a head tilt that's signaling you have my attention and I'm not amused. What really jumped out at me is that we saw this exact gesture from another celebrity during an interview 3 years ago on the channel. So we were looking at a video of Robert Downey Jr. when an interviewer got a little too confrontational and we saw the exact same thing. That stare with that head tilt, and that was moments before he got up and he walked away.
You think you're free of all of that? Or whether that's still something
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
do you...
You seem okay, it's just getting a little dinosaur in your...
No, look, I don't want to do that.
And it's crazy, the overlap. Two actors being interviewed by someone gets a little confrontational. We see that kind of sizing the person up with that stare, you know, no amusement on the face. And in this case, they moved on from it. With Robert Downey Jr., it ended the interview. Anyways, the question here is asked, and Sydney says, I think that if I have an issue that I want to talk about, people will hear. And now she looks at the reporter and acknowledges like this, confidently with the head, which echoes what she said earlier. Much earlier in the interview, we talked about this. When she has something that's important to her, a message, she uses her art to get it out there. Somehow she comments on it. Now, this is very interesting because technically it's a non-answer, right? A question is asked and she's refusing to answer the question. But in refusing to answer it, she's also kind of giving her answer, saying that she doesn't necessarily see what the big deal is about and she doesn't want to comment on this. She doesn't want to get involved. Now, we do need to take a second here to think about how difficult of a position she is here. Because if she comes out and sympathizes with the critics and says, look, I'm sorry it came off that way, there's a bit of an acknowledgement there that she could see how it came off that way. And that's a really bad look for American Eagle, the company that she's working with and she's supposed to represent. On the other hand, if she flat out comes out and says, no, I think they're all wrong, what they saw is nonsense, if she says that, it's not a great look because it really seems like she's taking a very firm position. So no comment is basically the only option that she has, but in saying no comment, she's kind of implying that she doesn't see what the issue is with this topic. So she gave her no comment answer, and the reporter took the hint and immediately moved on from it, and things got progressively friendlier from there. A lot of people are just sharing that clip, and it seems like it was really awkward, but they moved on from it pretty effectively. But I would love to know in the comments from you, do you think that there would have been a better way to handle that question to where everyone's happy? Is there an answer she could have given that American Eagle, the company she's working with, would have been happy, but also would have eased up the critics? Or is it a catch-22 where whichever way she goes, someone's going to be unhappy? Also, let me know what you thought of the interview itself. Do you feel like the questions were fine in the way that they were framed, or were they a little pushier in your opinion? Let me know what you thought of the behaviors that we covered in this video, and I will see you on the next one.